Friends, colleagues and listeners, here we are again, another weekend show with Mr. Dickson. And my God, what a T-shirt that's come out from the collection there, a Caribbean focused, I believe.
It's a Caribbean Airlines outfit, yes, Chris. Yeah. One of our customers was kind enough to gift me a T-shirt. I suspect that they were not flying off the shelf, so they may have decided that they were better worn by their consultants and advisors.
I don't know, mate. I think it's good enough there, and I'm wearing my revenge shirt for today. So playing against South Africa this afternoon at Twickenham. So touch wood. Hopefully England are going to win. Little victory for those damn losses during the Lions tour. So Stephen, here we are, another week again, mate. Now listen, I've had quite a few people contact me, and they said, "Would you ask this question? Would you, put this concern to Stephen, get his advice, etc." And I thought, I feel like the secretary for the doctor. So, Dr. Dickson's half hour, we might be calling this now. Anyhow, Dr. Dickson, would you be kind enough to look at these following ailments? So, ironically, one of the first ones, which is something that, it was referred to in the very first podcast we did, where you named so many people that were influential in your career and who gave you a start, and what made you want to stay in the career in the industry, what made you have that passion and engagement, which I got to say, Steve, is lovely because you still got it. But yeah, they were saying, what was it? And then the question is, okay, why would you, if you had the chance again, with everything that's going on, why would you now choose this industry to come into, especially now that there's even more disruption expected over the next 3 months? There's even more problems because of the way people have dealt with opening up fully and getting some sort of a balance and some sort of a plateau. Why would you come in to this industry now when it really does appear to be, not as secure as it should do? And that's reflected in the share prices as well. I mean, it's such a shame. So why, Stephen?
Well, as somebody who is an impassioned aviation, buff, and who's made a reasonably decent career out of this with a reasonable innings thus far. This is my bread and butter, Chris. Aviation sort of flows through my blood. But look, if I was to do this all over again, would I make the same choices again? I suspect I probably would. This industry has gone. This is not the first crisis that has affected us. When I think back, to the various sort of crises that we've had to deal with, that we've contended with over the years, whether it be, from when I started late 90s, September 11th. The shake-up and the aftermath of that, which wasn't felt so much in Europe as the industry shake-up in North America, but certainly there's a lot of shake-up and fallout after that. We had lots of concern there around aviation security and restrictions, and we had to get much tighter around that. Travel became much more difficult. Things like flight deck visits disappeared when I used to commute on the flight deck everywhere I went. I'm sure you did yourself, Chris. It was all part of the fun. But
yeah.
A lot of things changed. Then we had volcanoes, we've had earthquakes, we've had all sorts of crises. We've had national air traffic services shut down. We've had airspace closures for days, weeks on end. There's it's been crisis after crisis. Now nothing's been as prolonged. No one event has been as prolonged as this. But I guess by the fact that we all work in aviation, we are used to going into crisis management mode quite a lot. I love being in the thick of it. I love throwing myself into the deep end. I love, throwing myself in front of the passengers when I can, not as often as I would have done before, but as much as I can do nowadays with the client work that we do. It's a bit more of a rarity, but I love the cut and thrust of that. Now, the pace of this industry doesn't suit everybody. The challenge that it throws at you will not suit everyone. The events of the last 18 months, those that have been in the industry that have had a reasonably good career, or it's been relatively sustainable. There's only so much love that you can have for an industry when it stops paying your mortgage, when it stops paying your bills. And therefore people have had to divert their attention elsewhere. But I'm pretty positive. I'm always a glass half full person, as you probably well know. Actually, not that the physical glass is half full, actually the metaphorical glass is often half full. Very rare that my glass, as you know, Chris,
Yes.
remains anything more than half full. But from a from a serious perspective, I understand people's frustrations, why they might want to look elsewhere. But it's the passion and love for something that we feel so dearly about that keeps us going here. As a small anecdote, just to close on that, I was having a conversation this week with a client, and they said, "Oh, well, how did you end up in aviation after all these years? How are you still here?" And I said, "Well, kind of, we got sucked in, we got sold a pup, and we're still here by accident 20, 22 or 23 years later. I wanted to be a vet. I'd started preparation for veterinary school until I then started, deciding I had to pay for it, and was working at the flying school, and so, well, let's become a pilot. So, becoming a vet then took, I still love animals, and I'd still do everything for, or anything I could for every animal that is suffering. So so my love for animals never changed. It's just that I never made a career out of it. But and he sort of said the same thing. Well, I did a summer job as a baggage handler at he was working in Guyana or Grenada, one of the two. I think it's Guyana. He said, "Oh, I was doing a summer job in Guyana," and actually very apt Caribbean t-shirt on, but and I was doing a summer job for the ground handler there, and I ended up staying. So I think many of us come into the industry through that, doing a summer job, something we enjoy, something we like. I don't think that's any different to people that maybe get into hospitality and they'll do a summer job, offshore at an overseas resort or in a hotel or something. But we're stuck. And we're still here. And I wouldn't change a thing. Actually, I would still be here. I'd do the whole thing all over again.
Yeah. I can just imagine you now. You said something there earlier, and I thought, what a great strategy when you said throw yourself in front of the customers. So I can imagine now, customers complaining at a gate, and you just throw yourself on the ground in front, start apologising, you'd be very effective, Steve. But joking aside, one of the reasons the question was asked is because of the increase now in complaints, the reference to standards now also dropping. Okay, the reference to they don't know whether they're going to be flying here or there, and we'll come to the European restrictions that are coming up now. So never before, even though all these things we've experienced, and I agree with you, probably 90% of us fell into this industry because we had lived close to it, had an experience, or knew somebody that worked there, and also the appeal of flying and international and everything else was so good. But now with so many, you've got to be seen to be green and all these restrictions, everything's all coming at the same time. So you've got restrictions, curfews. Now you've got inflation, you've got supply chain problems, you've got the environment and sustainability pressures. There's so much all seems to be coming together. And when you look at the share prices now, I think IAG down to the early or late 40s. You've got EasyJet down now to £6. You've got Lufthansa down to around 586, and they were at nearly 30 back in 2018. I mean, it's really, really, really hitting hard. So, and again, with the hospitality side of things as well, that's also hit hard. And now if there's going to be more restrictions over Christmas and New Year, people having to swap their holidays because they'd already booked somewhere and now they've got to look at alternatives. It's a tough old time to be thinking, I must come back into this business.
Oh, for sure. Look, there's a lot of resilience required. The most resilient will have to be the shareholders, Chris. Yeah. And the shareholders and the investors, and supported by the bankers. I know that's a dirty word in some parts, but without them, unfortunately, we would have very few airlines now. We would still be operating. So, whilst some may believe that capitalism is people profiting from others' woes and strifes is wrong, but fundamentally it can't be wrong, whereby we are asking the banks and the investors to prop up others. So if you look even at the construct of wealth, or the wealth distribution during COVID, some people have got far richer than they've ever been before at the top end of the spectrum. So It's those that need that to trickle down through the economy to ensure that everybody gets a fair game, and that includes airlines, it includes supply chain, it includes airports, it includes everybody. And those are the kind of people that we should actually doff our hat to in terms of recognizing their success, rather than sort of complaining that these people are too wealthy. So I think what we need to understand then, Chris, is saying, okay, there's going to be a level of resilience. The cycle of economics is not my strong point, but if you look back to the various recessions that we've had over the years, historically, we've bounced back. Markets have bounced back over 5, 6, 7 year periods. They haven't bounced back over 1 or 2 year periods. We are seeing some recovery very early on. We'll still see some volatility in airline economics and airline share prices. I'm still surprised. What surprises me every day, Chris, is the very few number of airlines that have disappeared.
Yes.
This is frankly astounding. I suspect that more should have disappeared had it not been for the generosity of the taxpayer. The trouble is that the taxpayer, unfortunately, doesn't have control of their funds. The funds are vested in the politicians, and you mentioned Lufthansa there, fabulous airline, and a fabulous airline group. I was talking to somebody from Lufthansa only yesterday. The problem is, when you mention their share price, Chris, there's very little free float. So the share price of Lufthansa is not indicative of the market and the strength of Lufthansa. The free float of Lufthansa is tiny because the majority ownership rests with the German state. So I wouldn't be worried about that. Same with Air France KLM. They've had very privileged positions in Europe that a lot of airlines haven't. However, the airlines that have had the private airlines that have recovered most quickly are those like Wizz Air and Ryanair that are up on 2019 capacity, that have seized the opportunities. And therefore, if you are, questioning whether you want to come back into an industry that is so volatile or it's throwing so many sort of curveballs at you, or you just can't deal with difficult customers any longer, continually either complaining because they haven't got the refund, or then maybe it's time to look to a different avenue back into the industry. Maybe it's time to move into a different domain within the industry, because there are pockets of success that we're now seeing. We're seeing different sort of sourcing strategies. So airlines probably more likely to outsource rather than insource these days. And the airlines that are successful will only build on that, I think. So yes, I hear those people that have always questioned their presence or their validity or the value that they can contribute when the industry has not really supported them over the last 18 months, let's say. But we are a very volatile industry. Aviation has been one of the most resilient industries that I've ever when I think about it on a macro level, you think about what's thrown at it, you think about how critical it is in terms of connecting people, joining people, freight, transport, GDP contribution, 7, 8, 9 times multiples in GDP contribution, for in tourism senses and so on. So I think it's a great place to be. Are the wars and troubles over yet? No, they're not. But if you want to, sort of strap in for the ride, I think now is the time, and I'm seeing more and more jobs advertised every single day. So
no, I agree. It's just it's just making that leap of faith and that jump, and then on the other side, what this lady who I've known for a long time, what she's saying is, look how amazing the private aviation sector has managed the situation. And she's right as well, because you can hardly get an aircraft now for love nor money. Private aviation, I mean, it's gone through the roof.
Yeah.
And whilst that seems for the privileged and everything, and then like you were referring to earlier, I've never seen a poor man employ people. So we need people to be successful, and we need people to do well and be aware of why they're doing well.
Yeah.
Because that will then trickle down. It will cascade down to others.
Absolutely.
And it will help
Absolutely.
them. But if we listen to some of the extreme argumentation that tries to link everything from just a people perspective instead of profit and planet, it's madness. And those extreme levels of anything aren't good anywhere. So that's that, which leads now into the next question is, somebody else said, look, we keep hearing about sustainability and everything else. And, you've got to be seen to be green. And what they refer to is, it's one thing being seen to be green, it's another one actually doing something that effectively makes the difference. And this particular person was saying that, their company has been doing so much promotion recently, but inside there's no real action. Now that's terrible, Steve.
Well, look, it goes across the board, Chris. It's fashionable to be green. It's a ploy. It's a good marketing ploy. Now, I'm not a marketeer. I spent very little time other than a 1-year stint as head of commercial for Jetstar Asia in Singapore. I spent most of my time on the operations side of the business. So I've always looked at the marketing department as the colouring in department. A very valid contribution to the business, but it's their job to sell. And what sold seats, or what sold tours, or what sold hotel rooms last year is not going to sell hotel rooms this year. So they've got to change their strategy. So the strap lines change, the messaging changes, the narrative changes. Green just happens to be a very current affair that they believe people will buy into. Now, whether that's real or not is neither here nor there, Chris. But I think that we are right to question the integrity of firms that pretend that they are something that they are not. In the same way that the former Duke and Duchess of Sussex, are preaching to the masses in the United States, and yet flying around in their private jets and their motorcade like there's some bloody visiting dignitaries. I think they forgot they're no longer members of the royal family, but and the crazy Americans treat them this way. I think they've lost all touch with what is real. So it starts there, and do I expect presidents and prime ministers to fly commercial? No, I don't. I don't think anybody should. I think that's an unrealistic expectation. Do I expect them to take train travel when they can rather than air travel? Yes, of course I do. But there are security concerns, and there are security considerations that need to go into it. So will we see the top 1% all flying commercial from now on back and getting rid of all their private jets? Of course not. However, what we should see are some more people putting their money where their mouth is. And so if this is such a worthy cause, we know that private sector needs support to fund a lot of these initiatives. We know that the most polluting governments in the world need support in terms of political capital. They need economic capital. They need intellectual capital. And why don't the wealthies then start to contribute that to the emerging markets and the emerging economies, or the developing world, sub-Saharan Africa, for example? Instead, what happens in sub-Saharan Africa, the Chinese whoop right in there. So I'm not necessarily, this is not a massive against China.
They buy up land, they turn their own farms, they do everything, which initially it seems positive.
And you know what, Chris? The Chinese take a lot of flack, and I'll support the Chinese government on this. They take massive amount of flack from the Western world, people that know nothing about China, people that have never been outside their own country. 55% of Americans don't have passports, for example, yet they love to espouse to the world how they should operate. But the Chinese have gone in there and said, we don't want any return on the investment. We want to physically support you, to educate your people, to build the infrastructure, to support you, because that gives us jobs, it gives our construction firms, and they're not asking the governments for billions of dollars for every single project that they're working on. I can cite countless examples of them, particularly in places like Nigeria, in Ethiopia, in Libya, in the Central African Republic. There's many projects that one could roll off the top there. Now, the Chinese are smart. That's soft power. They're using their soft power to influence. Of course, when these countries look to buy other products, whether it be cars or washing machines or electronics or whatever, they'll look to China. Because what has Europe done for them? What has North America done for them? Absolutely bugger all. We talk about an international aid development programs. This is Mickey Mouse. So bringing it back to the green agenda, when you look at that and say, well, if the marketing messages need to be aligned with on trend, then you need to start, using the soft power that you have. States like the United Kingdom, for example, the United States, Japan, these very strong, top five economies of if you look at the G7, so throw France and Germany into the mix there potentially as well. But these countries have got a lot of power to add. They couldn't get anything really substantive over the line to stop stop China and India getting their coal back in there, which I thought was pretty awful. But these programs need funded, and they're not going to be funded out of thin air. So I accept that the messaging from selling air seats and selling air travel and carbon offsets and emission trading schemes, that's all sounds wonderful. But actually, let's understand that there has to be an investment. This is not a short game. This is a long-term play, and therefore I think that the messaging should reflect that. This is not about every airline becoming green overnight or every ground handler installing electrical equipment overnight. That's frankly economically, even though Greta Thunberg will disagree, that's frankly unrealistic, and therefore we need to be realistic with expectations and pragmatic about solutions.
Yeah, and what you're talking about there, the electrification of airports and everything, and the capability, it is a long game. The only trouble is, as soon as it goes 1 year, certain representative companies in certain airports, they've got to buy new equipment, and that new equipment has got to be a 15, 20, 25-year lifespan. So now they're buying something that's not electric again. So things have to move. The airports need to do a lot more. Governments, like you said earlier, they've got to do it in a structured way that makes sense, so that all the pieces of the jigsaw start to appear a lot quicker, and you can fill it in with the marketing, as you said earlier.
Yeah, which
is so important. Now, another point, another guy put down here was that as a result of something that we said a few weeks ago, so it's probably our fault. What he did was he went to his manager and said he'd like to be considered for cross training. So that he could do other jobs, etc., And point blankly, the union, his own union, turned around and said, no, we're not doing that. We can't do that. It's this job here, this job there, etc. That, to me, I think that's terrible, Steve.
Well, I remember being in some. I'm not surprised, Chris, but I remember being in some parts of the world where there's something alive and well called demarcation. And basically, it means that one person that does one job has to be marked, within this area. Another person, sort of, you drop for example, the guy in the bag room, he can't load bags. He can only deliver. He can do the bag room work, and he can deliver the bags to what we used to call like no man's land, like United Nations no man's land. And the other fellow would then pick up the bags and take them to the aircraft side. What was wrong with that fella driving the bags? Oh, no, mate, you can't do that. No. And those discussions were not being had by the workers; they were being had by the shop stewards.
Yeah, exactly.
It was the stewards that were preventing the business from implementing pragmatic change. This is 15 years ago, Chris. 20 years ago.
Yeah, no, I know well, Steve.
Nothing new. So nothing has moved on in that regard. I think in some areas they have. I mean, just go to your nearest airport and look at the terminal that is to the westerly of that airport. I won't mention but you understand the issues there, particularly around the southern perimeter road and on the western apron, by the western terminal precinct, whereby there's massive amounts of demarcation. They are not able to get the efficiencies that one would expect from a massive hub operation where they've got, and it exists everywhere, Chris. So I think there needs to be some heads banged together, and there needs to be some frank and honest conversations. What dismays me even more, though, in hearing your correspondent mention that is that even in spite of what we've been through in 18 months, this is the default position of a union official.
Exactly. And what a shame. And if that's happening on the people's side, it's no wonder then that there's not more enthusiasm or more acceptance or engagement with the opportunity to do it on a pooling side. For
you see, Chris, fundamentally, this boils down to their subscriptions. Because if we don't cross-skill people, we've got to employ other people in that unit, in that vertical, to carry out that task. And so we don't have this cross-skilling, which means I get more subs for the union here, and I fritter them away on 150 grand salaries for the union leaders, or private Range Rovers or whatever, which is what these union laggards do. I can't stand them. But not the union presence itself, but the senior officials of the union.
The ones who take advantage.
And the guys on the shop floor who want to do better, who want to do more, or the newbies coming in are told, "Oh, you must join that union." Must join the union. No, I must. No, until the pressure is squeezed until the young lad goes, "Fuck, I better just join the union then." Terrible. Happened to me, Chris. My first job at Service Air at Edinburgh Airport. Terrible. I was squeezed until I was forced to join a bloody union. I said, "What do I need a union for?"
Yeah. And then they pray. Well, not they pray, but then they wait for something to happen. And anybody who's not in the union who needs a little bit of support, we would have done this for you. And then it's an example to everybody else. And then suddenly everybody else joins then afterwards. But yeah, no, but it's such a shame, Steve, because if people are willing to be cross-skilled, it's helping with the cost for the company, which helps with salaries, and you can't have all these inflationary arguments in one hand, and then efficiencies and productivity and cost cutting in contracts on the other. So it just seems a shame. And then that's a similar resistance to just companies not wanting to pool equipment, even though there's so much assets out there now still not being used. It doesn't, for me, it beggars belief. This is the ideal time to pool everything and make airports more responsible for what goes on.
It's control, Chris. It's control. They're afraid. People are afraid of giving up control. I think we're all guilty of it in some regards. But they are afraid to give up control because they think giving up control means that they will have some adverse effect on their ability to run their business, run their operation. Actually, I believe it's probably opposite. I think what you need to do is have some willing partners come to the table that are kicking the ball in the same net.
Yeah.
If you're working with people that are trying to kick the ball, in the net behind you, then I agree we've got a problem. But I think we're all. I mean, it was great to see last week. Was it 2 weeks ago? Last week, I think it was a 6, might have been 10 days ago, whatever. When they had the first flight back to not the first flight back, but the first open, the first flight that was back to the open United States from Heathrow, with the parallel takeoff with the British Airways and Virgin Atlantic. Yeah. Nice. And it was great. It was great to see the pictures of Shai and Sean with their respective teams. And I thought that was fabulous. So if the CEO of Virgin Atlantic, the nemesis not because Virgin is any threat to British Airways, let's be frank, they clearly are not at their poky little size. But they've always been a little thorn in the side of British Airways. But to see Shai and Sean with their teams and a well-coordinated event for the benefit of the greater good of the industry, to put all of their history aside, I think shows that we should all be able to do that, and we should all be able to. Swissport should be able to sit down with Menzies and Donata and WFS and have the conversation. EasyJet and Ryanair should be able to have a conversation. I'm not expecting anything commercial and antitrust before everybody starts jumping in the bandwagon. No, this is about delivering operational efficiencies facilitated by a model or a vehicle at an airport that will allow us all to get more efficient, to allow us all to start to return people back to work, and to allow us all to avail of the opportunities in the post-COVID world that will be afforded to them.
Yeah, and also bringing into that, Steve, airports as well, because another question I've got is, and like say you've travelled again, I've travelled. I was on a flight. Where were we Saturday? I was on a flight Thursday night, and oh my God, people were going mad at that particular airport because everybody was queuing. There was only one desk open for everybody to check in. Then when we got through, there was only one screening machine open. Then when we got through there again, there was only one immigration desk open. And then everybody was waiting in a very small gate room, which was driving them crazy. And everybody then wanting to get up first to get on. And it was an absolute blooming nightmare. And they were all complaining. And everything they said was, why do they not just do that process smoother so it keeps everybody's frustration levels lower, but it also distributes and moves and in a certain flow the passengers, instead of going from one major queue to another major queue to another major queue.
Well, what was the issue? The queuing or the distancing or?
No, it was both. It was both. So you've got a huge big terminal, you got one gate open, and you've got everybody queuing all over the place and getting too close to each other. The one good thing is where I was, everybody wears masks. I applaud it. I think it's absolutely superb. Everybody wears masks all the time. I went in to get my newspaper and I just had it hanging from one ear. Oh, no, sir, you must put it on. I put it on. I really think that's good. The discipline, I know you might not agree, but the discipline is fantastic. And I think that's the best way. And coming up now in this winter period, people should be doing it everywhere. However, so there was one desk open. So they're all queuing there, right? And it was winding round, snaking round. So you know what happens where, people then try and get into it from the wrong side and there's frustrations. It's absolute murder. So then when we got that, then they had to go and do the baggage screening. So there was only one machine open, okay, instead of two, which was available, which was there. So then they got the same queue again. Then they went through to present their passports, and guess what? Only one gate open again, so the same big queue again. And then they all started filtering through into the gate area, and that wasn't sufficient for everybody all at the same time. But because it was taking too long way before the flight, everybody then was cramming in there with a few seats and there was no space in, etc. So it was just in my opinion, it was unnecessary, Steve. And it was the last flight out of the evening.
So just to counter that, I guess, Chris, we're all experiencing some different things now post-COVID. One is because I guess of pressure on resourcing and staffing and availability of staff. I certainly I'm used to, sitting at the bar, helping myself, not having to wait for staff, not literally helping myself, but rather than sort of having to sit at tables, even still we can go to the bar now. People are still saying, "Oh no, do you sit at the table?" I said, "I don't want to sit at the table. I would sit at the bar and get my drink." And the buffets have been sort of closed off now. We were on holiday in Langkawi last week, so there's a restaurant we go to for a brunch, and normally just fill up your plate. And but that was sort of still not the damn thing people would bring to you. So there's things that have changed. I also noticed a lack of staff and things were taking longer to get served. I accept that will be the case for a while. I know that people have really struggled to recover stuff. So I would say, look, in that circumstance, yes, there'll be queues. So there might only be, one check-in desk open. Yeah, but that's for a ground handler, Chris, that for the last 18 months has had no business, that's lost tens of millions of euros. So whilst it might be inconvenient to join a queue for 25 minutes, well, tough luck. I would say the other thing is...
Can I just jump in there?
Yeah.
Can I just jump in there? And just to add a little bit of perspective to it. What actually happened was there was one person on the check-in. Then when they went through to actually go onto the aircraft, there was 3 people. The other 2 were checking their carry-on bags and whether or not they'd paid for their bags.
Great.
That was rubbing that. Yeah, it's excellent from a revenue perspective, but that was rubbing salt in the wounds, because had they been at the front end, instead of the one person being under so much pressure with all these people, boom, 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 a lot of that would have been done there at the front end.
Yeah, but therein lies, we don't know the situation. They might not have been trained for the front end. They might only have been gate staff. There might have been demarcation issues. And I know the airport you came from, or certainly the region you came from. So we know that the unions are heavily present there, Chris, and there may well have been issues with that cross. So maybe they're not cross-skilled. So it might be rubbing salt in the wound, I would say also, but I'd encourage airlines to try and recover every single euro and cent that they can. They've not been able to pay. I also know that people like Treblisa, who operate the security services there, they will have been tight on people. They've lost lots of staff trying to bring people back. Night shift also got penalty rates to apply, right? Evening shift. So I'm just sort of playing devil's advocate a bit, saying, look, there are things that will be different. It won't be perfect. But let's not stop ourselves from being good at the desire of being perfect.
Yeah, which is also a valid point, Steve. But the PR, there was no announcements. There was no sort of, trying to make people be appreciative or aware or anything like that. Nothing on the website. Nothing on any of the.
Was it blue or orange?
I won't be saying. But what I am saying is that collectively, if you're told something, or if there's a bit of clarity or communication, okay, and a little bit more competence in that area, and you said earlier about marketing and PR comes into that as well. If people were explained certain things at a certain time and almost encouraged, to do the right thing with shall we say, a positive sense, not sense of humor, but a positive delivery, it takes away a lot of that information. It takes away a lot of that stress and anxiety. And I've watched people in lounges when somebody has said, right, in 30 minutes, we'll give you an announcement. And then it comes dead on 30 minutes and they're all looking at their watch and they're going like this, like they're putting their heads above the parapet. So where's the announcement? Where's the announcement? Gets to 5 minutes past. So saying, well, what's happening now then? What's happening? And then it drops. Why don't people who are in charge take a little bit of notice?
That's all part of the customer promise, Chris, and something that we do, and actually we doing a fair bit of work on this last week, is around the promise that we make to our customers. What are the expectations?
Yes.
When will we communicate with you? How will we communicate with you? What do we expect of you to ensure that you can conform and we can help you on your journey as easily and as quickly as possible? I think those are all very valid points. I would say though, most of those people that probably got stung at the boarding gate with a cabin bag were trying to save a few quid, and they were trying to be cute or smart, and they would have failed. So the only reason they got rubbed up was because they didn't follow the process in the first place. So they know fine well they should be checking that bag and are paying for that bag.
I think a lot of them surrendered happily just to get on the aircraft, Steve, because of all the queuing that they'd done. Their legs were swollen, mate. A lot of water retention. It was a difficult situation, but all I'm just saying,
that's dependent on the demographic, then, Chris.
Yes, very good. Yeah, I thought you'd say that. I know what it was like now with Morecambe and Wise and Laurel and Hardy. Someone's got to be the straight man and keep feeding the lines. But what I'm saying, Steve, seriously though, that everybody now has to have a different approach and a different look. And if you explain more to people and you're more aware of what is happening, because obviously people know what's happening, it's far better than to be a little bit open and a little bit more.
Sure, I think. Look, I accept that. I think that is very valid. What I would say also is that the people that haven't travelled for all this time, unless they've been living under a rock for the last 18 months, they know that things are different. They know that things will take longer, and they can also do a bit of preparation themselves to ensure that their bags are correct properly, that they don't have all these. Still people don't come to the airport prepared, knowing that things will be different. People like Heathrow Immigration, I honestly say, if you follow the rules, you breeze through there. I don't know what all this fuss is about in the press about border force. If you follow the rules, you submit your PLF, you scan your barcode for your vaccine, you get a status that says verified full exempt or verified full. If you don't do that, you get declared full, and you got to then go and join the client. You can't use the e-gates. You got to make these people, and they've got none of the papers available. They make everything difficult. So they create these queues, I would say, to a large extent themselves. Cabin crew on every flight I've been on, have your documents ready. Get your passports out. There's a check at the top of the board, at the top of the air bridge. 90% of those clowns have got cloth ears. They're not listening to anything that anybody says, Chris. So I would say that the self-loading freight, our dear passengers, need to take a little bit more responsibility, as we all do in the post-COVID world. And I think I think the industry will do a lot and will help them, but we can't. The helpless can't be helped.
Then there's an opportunity for us. Help us to help you, because what we've got to do
absolutely, totally.
That's a big opportunity now to and I know you more than anybody. You always say, like, we've got to look for an opportunity to make ourselves better than anybody else.
Of course, and I think that it starts with personal responsibility, but it also starts with corporate responsibility. As a business, we've got to ensure that the business is doing as much as they can. But if the customers still fail, and I think look at it largely, Chris. Look at all the efforts and investment that IATA have made, that British Airways have made, that EasyJet have made, right, in systems and pre-distribution of documentation, verification, etc. I think the industry, has done a lot, and we still got to manage the exceptions, which is still always solved for those that need help in terms of the PRMs or disabled passengers or elderly and infirm. I think we have a moral obligation, let alone anything else, to help them. But outside that group, there's often no reason that people can't be prepared. In the same way that you always now leave the house with your mask in your pocket. you can also make sure that you've got your QR code open at the immigration counter or the
Exactly.
check-in counter when they are, rather than fumbling around in your phone. Or in fact,
Exactly.
I print everything out now. Actually, I just print everything because it's far easier to.
And do you know something? Which is a classic. One member of staff said to everybody, right, when they were in the gate, they said, we've had some difficulties. What I recommend you do in the future is print everything out.
Absolutely. I print everything. Much easier.
But there goes your sustainability issue where everything's supposed to be digitalized. And now people are being told you're far better off printing it out because we can see it and we can do it quicker. What a shame.
It's a risk mitigation strategy, Chris.
Yeah, what a shame, though. What a shame. But listen, I'm just going to finish with one little anecdote. One of my brothers is in air freight. He's got his own air freight company, right? And he said to me, he said, you're always talking about changes and things for the better and everything. He said 30 years ago, he said there used to be an airline rep who used to come in to our office, and as he opened the door, he'd say, sorry. And then he'd say, right, now that I've got that out of the way, he said, how is everybody? What can we do for you? He was apologising in advance for the bad services that were being given. And my brother Mickey said, here we are now, 30 years later. He said, might as well be the same bloody message.
Sorry.
Standards. First intake, sorry.
Yeah.
And that's from that, and that from his perspective, it's from acceptability, loadability, wing pallets, how to build pallets when flights have got to change. One thing that he said, which is right, he said that some of his customers will pay for privileged service or priority service, which they're happy to pay for. But he said he asked a particular set of carriers, so once I do that on priority, that means it goes from here on priority. He said, yeah, of course it does, Mick. And he said, but what happens when it gets to the other end? He said, oh, no. He said, that's it. He said, it's getting there. So Mick said, so there's no priority or customs or nothing. He said, no, he said, it's getting there. So there's room, Steve, there's room for us all to help everyone help themselves.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Mate, thank you so much. Always lovely to see you. Love your T-shirt. And if England win today by at least 12 points, it'll be a little bit of justice, but it'll be the wrong game to have won. So I'm looking forward to going to Twickenham this afternoon and speaking to you later on in the week. And we'll see you again next week. And it's lovely that Salem's back with us. The old.
Yeah, thanks, Salem, for picking up our slack. We obviously we didn't. We thought the P45 was in the post, but apparently my efforts to record solo didn't pass muster with the boss, Chris. So we are back as a happy threesome.
Yes, indeed. Yeah, and looking forward again next week. All the best, I think we'll leave it at that. Okay, come on, England, you're going to win this afternoon. Take care, son. See you next week.
Do it for England. See you, Chris.
Cheers, mate.